All right, let's do this. Today we're taking a deep dive into Rabindranath Tagore.
Sounds good.
I know you've been wanting to explore his work for a while now.
Yeah, definitely.
This deep dive was requested by a listener, actually, who pointed us to this podcast episode called The Bard of Bengal, The Life and Legacy of Rabindranath Tagore. It's from a series called Legends Unveiled.
Okay, cool.
So, full disclosure, even before I listened to the episode, I was already intrigued.
By what?
Well, just the fact that Tagore was the first non-European to win the Nobel Prize in Literature.
Oh, wow.
And that was back in 1913. I mean, talk about a trailblazer.
Yeah, definitely ahead of his time.
Okay, so are you ready to uncover the life of this literary giant? I mean, he was so much more than just a writer, reformer, educator, key figure in India's freedom struggle.
Absolutely. Let's dive in.
All right. So, the podcast starts with Tagore's early life in Kolkata, born in 1861,
Right.
into a pretty prominent family, I guess you could say.
Very prominent, actually.
And get this, he was the youngest of 13 siblings.
Oh, wow. Big family.
Can you imagine? I can barely keep track of my two. Anyway, the podcast mentions that the family was super involved in intellectual and artistic pursuits.
Yeah, that was a huge part of their life.
What was that atmosphere like? Can you paint us a picture?
Imagine a home filled with constant discussion and debate.
Lively dinner conversations, I bet.
Definitely. His father was a spiritual leader and a key figure in the Bengal Renaissance.
So these weren't just casual chats about the weather.
No, not at all. They were discussing philosophy, art, literature, the big questions of the day.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, it really fostered this environment of critical thinking and creativity.
I can see how that would shape someone from a young age.
Absolutely. It ignited Tagore's passions for sure.
But here's the interesting thing. The podcast also mentions that Tagore wasn't a fan of formal schooling.
Right. He really struggled with traditional education.
What do you think that was? I mean, considering his upbringing, it seems kind of surprising.
Well, he found formal schooling to be very restrictive.
Too structured.
Yeah, it stifled his natural curiosity.
He was a self-learner then.
Very much so. He devoured books on all sorts of topics.
I can relate to that.
Learning at his own pace, exploring his own interests, that's what really resonated with him.
So then it's even more interesting that he was sent to England to study law, right?
You would think so, wouldn't you?
Well, of course, he returned without a degree.
Yep. Decided to follow his heart instead.
Dedicated himself to writing and music.
That's where his true passion lay.
It must have been a bold move, especially back then.
Oh, absolutely. Think about the societal pressure to conform.
Especially for someone from his background.
Exactly. But Tagore was driven by something deeper.
A true artist's spirit.
I think so. He recognized his calling and went for it.
And that decision really paid off. He published his first collection of poems at just 16.
Yeah, he was incredibly talented.
And by the time he won the Nobel Prize, he was prolific.
Oh, definitely. Novels, essays, dramas, songs.
It's hard to imagine having that much creative energy.
He was a force of nature.
The podcast mentioned that the Nobel Committee was particularly captivated by his collection of poems, Gitanjali.
Right, they were blown away by it.
They even praised it for its profoundly sensitive and fresh verse.
They saw something really special in his work.
I'm curious, do you have a favorite line or image from Gitanjali that you think really captures the essence of Tagore's poetic voice?
Oh, it's hard to pick just one.
I bet. But is there one that comes to mind?
Well, there's a line from poem number 35 that always stays with me. Where the mind is without fear and the head is held high, where knowledge is free. It's so simple, yet so powerful.
It's about liberation, isn't it?
Yes, both individual and societal. That yearning for a world where people can think and express themselves freely.
It's amazing how those themes resonate even today.
They're universal. And that's what makes Tagore's work so enduring.
He speaks to the human condition in a way that transcends cultural boundaries.
Exactly. His writings explore love, nature, spirituality. They touch on something deep within us.
Okay, so we've talked about his poetry, but then on top of all of this, he becomes a visionary reformer and educator.
That's right.
I mean, founding Visva-Bharati University in 1921 is a huge undertaking. What was so special about this university?
Well, it was revolutionary for its time.
In what way?
Tagore envisioned it as a place where Eastern and Western thought could come together.
That's pretty radical for the early 20th century.
It was. He was challenging the very norms of education.
What did he want to be different? What were the main things he was trying to change?
Well, think about it. This is a time when rote learning and strict discipline were the norm.
Right, the traditional model.
Exactly. Tagore flips the script entirely. He emphasizes learning through living, through engagement with the world. not just textbooks.
So not just what you learn, but how you learn.
Precisely. He saw education as this process of self-discovery and personal growth.
That's fascinating. So it wasn't just about filling your head with facts.
No, it was about nurturing the whole person.
I'm curious to learn more about how this vision actually played out at the university.
Well, let's start with the location.
Okay.
The university was established in Shantiniketan.
I've heard of that.
It's a rural area known for its natural beauty.
So he chose the location very intentionally.
Oh, absolutely.
Interesting.
Tagore wanted the students to be immersed in nature,
Makes sense.
to experience its rhythms and learn from it firsthand.
So the campus itself was part of the learning experience.
Exactly. A radical departure from those stuffy classrooms, you know?
Totally. Okay, so what about the curriculum? Was that different too?
Oh, yeah. Very innovative.
How so?
Well, Tagore emphasized the importance of the arts.
The arts.
Music, dance, theater, all considered integral to a well-rounded education.
It's like he was anticipating those modern alternative education models.
You know, like Waldorf schools.
Yeah. They also emphasize hands-on learning and the arts.
It's amazing how ahead of his time he was.
Totally. Okay, so arts were important, but was there anything else that stood out about the curriculum?
Well, he also really emphasized cross-cultural exchange.
How did that work?
He invited scholars and artists from all over the world to Visva-Bharati.
Wow.
So it created this incredible, diverse, and vibrant learning environment.
I can only imagine. So he was really trying to break down barriers and build bridges through education, huh?
Exactly.
What do you think were the biggest barriers he was trying to overcome?
I think one of the biggest was just the mindset of the time.
Like what?
The idea that education had to be about memorization, you know, and conformity.
Right.
Tagore wanted to show that it could be so much more than that.
So much more.
Exploration, creativity, critical thinking, these were all key for him.
And then also breaking down the barriers between East and West, right?
Yes. Creating a space where different cultures could meet and learn from each other.
Do you think he was successful?
Well, I think Visva-Bharati speaks for itself, don't you think?
It's still around today.
Yes. And thriving. A testament to his vision.
It's amazing to think about the impact he had on education.
It really is.
His ideas are still so relevant.
Definitely ahead of his time.
Okay, so we've explored his revolutionary work in education, but I'm really eager to dive deeper into his poetry now.
Sure. What did you want to hear?
You mentioned you had some excerpts that you thought would really capture his style.
Oh, yeah. I do.
Let's hear them.
Okay, well, since we've already talked a little bit about Gitanjali,
Yeah.
let's start there, okay?
Oh, okay.
Let's see. Okay, this is from poem number 7. My song has put off her adornments. She has no pride of dress and decoration. Ornaments would mar our union. They would come between thee and me. Their jingling would drown thy whispers.
Wow.
What do you think?
It's so simple, yet so profound.
Right.
I love how much he conveys with such simple language. It feels very personal and intimate.
That's what's so remarkable about Tagore's poetry.
Yeah.
He can express complex ideas and emotions with such directness and clarity.
I can see that.
There's this mystical quality to his work, too, you know?
Almost like a longing for something beyond the material world.
Exactly.
It kind of reminds me of Rumi's poetry.
Oh, yeah, I see that connection, too.
They both explore themes of spirituality and the search for deeper meaning.
Exactly. Tagore was deeply influenced by both Eastern and Western philosophical traditions.
And that really comes through in his writing.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that the poem, Where the Mind is Without Fear, is often quoted on its own.
Oh, yeah, that one's really popular.
Can you tell us more about that poem?
Sure. It's actually from the collection Gitanjali, but
Right.
its message is so powerful that it often stands alone.
It's a call for freedom, isn't it?
Yeah, for freedom and enlightenment. Listen to this. Where the mind is without fear and the head is held high, where knowledge is free, where the world has not been broken up into fragments by narrow domestic walls.
Wow, it gives me chills every time I hear it.
Powerful stuff, right?
So full of hope.
And longing for a better world.
It really captures Tagore's vision.
For a more open and united society.
And it's a vision that feels so relevant today.
Maybe even more so than when it was written.
We still have so much work to do to break down those walls.
You're telling me.
To create a world where everyone can live with dignity and freedom.
That's the dream.
It is. Okay, so as you're reading his poetry, I can't help but think about his relationship with Gandhi.
Oh, interesting.
They both fought for India's freedom,
Right.
but they seem to approach it from very different angles.
That's a great observation.
Yeah.
They definitely had different approaches.
Gandhi was much more focused on the practicalities of self-rule.
Right. Very much a pragmatist.
And Tagore seemed more concerned with the spiritual and cultural side of freedom.
Yeah, and the dangers of narrow nationalism.
It's fascinating how their personalities and approaches complement each other.
It really is.
The podcast talked about their conversations.
They had some great ones.
What do you think those gatherings at Tagore's home must have been like?
Well, just imagine a room full of intellectuals, artists, revolutionaries,
Wow.
debating the future of India.
Grappling with these complex questions.
Freedom, identity, progress.
It must have been quite the dynamic exchange of ideas.
Oh, I bet.
And those disagreements, I wonder how they shaped both of their thinking.
That's a fascinating question to consider.
It is. It seems like they both deeply respected each other's perspectives.
Absolutely.
And they recognized the importance of dialogue even when they didn't agree.
For sure.
And those gatherings weren't just limited to Gandhi, right?
Oh, no, not at all.
Tagore's home was a hub for all sorts of fascinating figures.
During a pivotal time in India's history.
Exactly.
He was really at the center of this intellectual and artistic movement.
It's incredible how his influence extended to so many aspects of Indian culture.
He touched so many lives.
And he just kept writing through it all. Even in his later years, he explored painting and sketching too.
Yeah, his creative energy was boundless. Always exploring.
And amazing.
And his paintings were well received too. Gained recognition internationally.
Yeah, it's remarkable how he continued to create.
Right up until the end.
Until his death in 1941.
He lived a long and fulfilling life.
I think we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
We've talked about his incredible life story.
His genius.
His role in India's struggle for independence.
His amazing work in education.
His relationship with other key figures. It's been quite a journey.
It has.
What resonates most with you about his legacy?
That's a good question.
What stands out?
I think, for me, is how he managed to bridge so many different worlds.
In what way?
He was a poet,
Uh-huh.
a philosopher, a musician, an educator, a social reformer, advocate for freedom.
Wow, that's quite a list.
And he didn't just dabble,
Yeah.
He excelled in all of those areas.
That's incredible. It's inspiring to see someone so committed to living a life of purpose.
Yeah, and not being afraid to challenge the status quo.
What do you think makes his legacy so enduring? Even today, he's still so relevant.
I think it's his unwavering belief in the power of humanity.
Hmm.
He wasn't driven by fame or fortune,
What was he driven by?
a deep desire to make the world a better place.
And that resonates with people.
Lost generations and cultures.
It's interesting that you mentioned that because I was thinking about his legacy in the context of his educational philosophy.
Right.
Visva-Bharati University is still thriving today.
It is. Considered one of the top universities in India, actually.
Wow.
And it attracts students from all over the world.
Amazing.
It's not just a university, though.
What is it?
It's a living, breathing testament to his vision of education.
As a transformative force.
Exactly. It's amazing to think about his ideas shaping young minds even now, over a century later. Incredible, right? And it's not just his educational legacy that's important.
What else?
His writings are still studied and celebrated globally.
And his music.
Remains beloved in India and beyond.
His work has this timeless quality to it.
It speaks to the human spirit.
So do you think any aspects of Tagore's life or work are particularly relevant to us today? Given the challenges of the 21st century.
That's a good question.
I don't know. What do you think?
Well, his focus on cross-cultural understanding and dialogue feels more relevant than ever, I think.
Especially now.
We live in such an interconnected world, but
Yeah.
we also face rising nationalism.
On intolerance.
Exactly. Xenophobia is on the rise.
I know.
Tagore's message of unity and harmony,
Yeah.
his belief in our shared humanity,
Yeah.
it's like a powerful antidote to all of that.
And his warnings about the dangers of aggressive nationalism.
Oh yeah, those feel especially timely.
Given the state of things.
Definite.
It's like he saw it was coming.
He did. He saw the destructive potential of nationalism firsthand,
Right.
and he advocated for a more inclusive view.
A cosmopolitan view.
Yes, embracing diversity, recognizing our interconnectedness.
That's a message we need to hear.
More than ever.
It is. It's a powerful reminder that we're all part of something bigger than ourselves.
That our fates are intertwined.
Exactly. We need to find ways to bridge our differences.
And work together.
To create a more just and sustainable future.
That's the goal.
It is. Okay, well, this has been an amazing deep dive into the world of Rabindranath Tagore.
It has.
I feel like we've only just scratched the surface.
There's so much more to explore.
But I've already learned so much from this conversation.
Me too.
It's clear that he was so much more than just a great writer,
A true visionary.
a passionate advocate for change.
And a global citizen.
Before we wrap up, is there anything else you think our listeners should know about Tagore?
Let me think.
Any final thoughts or recommendations?
I would just encourage our listener to explore Tagore's work for themselves,
Go deeper.
Pick up a collection of his poems,
Yeah.
read one of his novels, maybe listen to some of his music.
Let Tagore's words and melodies wash over you.
Exactly.
See what speaks to your soul.
You might be surprised by what you discover.
I love that. Okay, well, on that note, we'll leave you with one final thought from Tagore himself.
Okay.
He said, "The butterfly counts not months, but moments, and has time enough."
Beautiful.
Let's all try to live our lives with that same sense of presence.
And appreciation for the beauty of each moment.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Until next time.
It's amazing how much we've uncovered already, and I feel like we're just getting started.
Yeah, there's so much depth to his life and work.
You know, it's funny, as we've been talking about Tagore's journey, I keep thinking back to that one fact that really got me hooked initially.
What's that?
Him being the first non-European to win the Nobel Prize in literature.
Right, back in 1913.
Such a huge accomplishment. What do you think that recognition meant?
I mean, both for Tagore, personally.
Right? And for the world's perception of Indian literature.
It was a watershed moment, for sure.
I bet.
Not just for Tagore, but for Indian literature as a whole.
How so?
It signaled that Indian voices, Indian stories, were finally being recognized on the global stage. Like, their perspectives mattered.
It must have been pretty validating for Tagore, too, don't you think?
I think so, especially given his complex relationship with the West.
Right, he was critical of colonialism.
But he also drew inspiration from Western thinkers and writers.
He was able to hold those two things at the same time.
Absolutely.
It's a testament to his ability to navigate those complexities, right?
Yeah.
To forge his own path, drawing from different sources, but staying true to his roots.
He wasn't rejecting the West outright.
Right.
He was engaging with it critically.
Picking and choosing what resonated with him.
Exactly. Challenging their assumptions and biases.
All while advocating for India's independence.
And composing those incredible anthems.
Right. Symbols of national pride and unity. Do you think winning the Nobel Prize amplified his message?
Definitely.
Gave him a bigger platform?
For sure. It brought him international fame.
Recognition.
A level of influence that he might not have had otherwise.
So his writings were translated.
Numerous languages.
His lectures
Drew huge crowds around the world.
Wow. He used that platform to speak out against colonialism.
To advocate for peace.
For understanding between cultures.
And for India's freedom.
It's incredible to think about the impact he had.
Not just as a writer.
But as a global citizen.
A voice for change.
During such a turbulent time in history, too.
A time of immense upheaval and transformation.
His message really resonated with people worldwide.
It did.
He wasn't just speaking to Indians.
We're Westerners.
He was speaking to something universal within us.
The human spirit.
That desire for freedom, for justice, for meaning.
In a rapidly changing world.
That's what makes Tagore so compelling, even today.
I agree.
He speaks to our shared humanity.
The challenges.
And the possibilities.
That we all face.
As individuals.
And as a global community.
I think you said it best earlier. Tagore's work offers us a roadmap.
A way to navigate those challenges.
With wisdom.
And passion.
And a deep understanding of how everything is connected.
It all comes back to that.
This has been such an insightful deep dive.
It really has.
Into the world of Rabindranath Tagore.
Such a fascinating figure.
We've only scratched the surface.
There's always more to uncover.
But I feel like I've gained a whole new perspective on his life and work.
Me too.
He was so much more than just a great writer.
A true visionary.
A passionate advocate for social change.
And a global citizen in the truest sense.
For our listener who requested this deep dive,
yes,
what's the most important thing to take away from Tagore's legacy?
That's a great question.
What can we learn from his life that applies to us today?
I think Tagore teaches us the importance of embracing our own unique identities while remaining open to other cultures.
Being open to different perspectives.
Yes.
He reminds us that true freedom goes beyond just politics, right?
Absolutely.
It's also about freedom of the mind.
and the spirit.
He challenged us to use our gifts
Our creativity, intellect, our compassion.
to make the world a better place.
To strive for justice.
And
To leave the world a little brighter than we found it.
I love that.
Tagore really believed in that.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of Rabindranath Tagore, I think it's fitting to leave our listener with one final thought from the Bard of Bengal himself.
Let's hear it.
He said, "Reach high, for stars lie hidden in your soul. Dream deep, for every dream precedes the goal."
Beautiful.
Let those words inspire you to dream big, to never stop reaching for those stars.
To strive for a better future.
Thanks for joining us on this incredible journey exploring the life and work of Rabindranath Tagore.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time.